last sense that we're going to talk about in this class is the sense of smell. So we've covered almost all of the 5 senses that we discussed at the very beginning of the class. As I'm sure you remember, we talked about touch and temperature, which is felt by your skin, and that's basically a physical stimulus against your skin. We talked about vision, which is the sense of light, and we talked about taste, and now we're talking about smell. And what do taste and smell have in common? They're connected.
They
Yes.
have the same airway.
Yes? So your tongue and your nose, what they sense is often connected. Yes, that's true. And what are they sensing? What type of stimulus are they sensing? Flavor. Good. Kind of thinking about, for example, your eyes sense light, your ears sense sound waves, your taste and your smell sense what? What's in your food?
Nutritional value.
More basic than that. Or what's in the air? What is it that you're sensing when you're smelling? It's not light, it's not sound waves, it's not pressure. It's air. What's in the air that you're sensing? Marco, do you want to answer this question? Chemicals. Yes, very good, Marco. So taste and smell have in common that they both sense chemicals. So they're very closely connected in that way also. The difference is, does someone want to tell me what the difference is between taste and smell? Any difference? Yeah, Arya.
I think the method, I guess, smells is a different method of sensing than taste.
Yes, it is a different method. But why do you need 2 different methods for sensing chemicals?
So you can smell it.
Sometimes they're airborne and sometimes they're in things you're eating.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was looking for. So your taste senses chemicals that are in your food, and you have to actually put them in your mouth to taste them. Whereas your smell senses all kinds of chemicals that are volatilized in the air, right? Okay. So in Vanessa's lecture about taste, she mentioned a handful of things that you can taste, 5 things that you can taste. So let's try to do a similar thing for smell. What kind of different things can you smell? Just shout out some things. Gasoline, okay, that's a kind of a gross smell for most people. What else? Toxic things, okay. Body odor. Why are you thinking just of gross things? Think of some nice things to smell.
Gross things. When something smells
Flowers.
gross,
You can smell flowers. What else?
Cologne.
Cologne? Yeah. Any other smells that you like? Food. I love the smell of food. Rain, grass. Are you thinking of lots of smells? Because the point I'm trying to make is that you can smell lots and lots of different things. So another difference between taste and smell is that for taste, you can only your taste buds can only detect 5 different types of taste, but you can detect lots and lots of different smells. Trillions of smells. So some examples that I think are nice that I put up here are different kinds of flowers, oranges, food, vanilla, pine needles. Became very small. Hay bales. Nice smells. Okay, what kinds of things do we need smell for in our life as an animal?
We need to know where the food is.
Detection of
Yes. So one very important thing that we need smell for is to find food. What's another one?
detection of
Chemicals. So if you, so like bad chemicals, you mean? Like poisons?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can avoid bad things, yeah? these are sort of in order, and I think that's actually the last one. But that's really good. So detection and avoidance of dangerous places and maybe also dangerous animals.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, another example?
To fully taste flavor.
Yes. To fully. So another life and enjoyment of food kind of thing, is what you're saying? Okay. What else might you need smell for? So somebody said body odor and somebody said cologne.
Hygiene.
Hygiene? Okay. What do you need hygiene for?
Looking good, feeling good.
Looking good, yeah.
Attractive,
Like say you're
possibly.
trying to find a mate. You might need a sense of smell. So maybe in humans this works a little differently, but in many insects, as an example, no, well, they have pheromones, so they attract mates by releasing a type of smell.
Don't humans also release pheromones?
They do.
And what? Yeah, it'd be a lot easier to find someone to date if we didn't own your uterus. I was reading that somewhere.
Yeah. And then social cues in general, not just for mating, but for example, if you have a dog, when you're walking your dog down the street and they meet another dog, the first thing they usually do is sniff each other in different places. And they find out a lot of information about the other dog that way. And then the last one we already mentioned is detecting danger. So danger could be something like a burning forest, or maybe some toxic chemicals, or maybe a predator that is trying to eat you. Okay, so smell is very, very important. And so, okay. So I'm going to tell you briefly about how the nose works and how the olfactory system works. So as I'm sure you already know, the chemicals that we're sensing are in the air, and we inhale them into our nose. And in the nose, there's this big cavity. And kind of at the roof of that cavity is something called the olfactory epithelium, and that's kind of like a moist membrane. And you have a lot of nerve endings here that detect the different types of smells. And in those nerve endings, this is sort of what they look like. They have all these little projections into this kind of slimy surface. And these are another type of receptor cell, just like the types of cells that you learned about that are in your skin that can detect touch, or the ones in your retina that detect light, or even like the taste buds. It's the same idea. They're specialized cells that will sense all the different chemicals that you're breathing in. And in these cells, there are very specialized molecules that do this. So kind of one of the key concepts that we want you to learn in this class, the first one was that neurons run on electricity. And the second one is that the sensory receptor cells, they take a stimulus from the environment and translate it into a neural signal, into an electrical signal that the neurons understand. And the way they do that is through these proteins called channels, ion channels. So we've mentioned that before, right? And the special thing about the olfactory system is that each of these specialized sensory cells only has one type of channel that only detects one type of what is called an odorant. Okay? So you have, as I said, you can detect many different types of smells. And the way you do that is by having many different types of cells that each have one very specific receptor channel. And then if you have a limited number of channels, how can you detect so many different cells? Well, that's different smells. It's a little bit complicated because your brain basically has to take a pattern of different odorants and combine them together to give you a specific smell. For example, the smell of roses is probably not just one chemical, right? But you can identify the smell of roses maybe pretty well. And so your brain knows how to take a combination of certain types of smell and translate that into one message of one type of smell that you're detecting. Okay. As I'm sure you're aware, different types of animals have varying skills at smelling. And something that might depend or a determinant of how good you are at smelling is how many of these different receptor channels you have. So let's imagine if you have lots and lots of different types of channels, would you be good at smelling or bad at smelling? You'd be pretty good at smelling, right? Because you can detect lots of different things. So this chart is a chart of different animals and how many genes they have for these receptor channels. So do you want to guess where humans are on this chart?
Middle/bottom.
Middle/bottom. Someone here?
Yeah.
That's a good guess.
Maybe the second to last. Because we don't rely on it as much as like animals in the wild.
That's true. Yeah, we don't. We don't rely on it very much. And we usually don't pay a lot of attention to it either. Yeah. What do you think, what do you guess would be this one at the top? Dogs? Sharks? Yeah, so you already know sharks have very good sense of smell. You know dogs have very good sense of smell.
Because then they
Cockroaches.
the food in the house.
Okay, which do you think is better, a cockroach or a bloodhound? Okay, that's a good guess. So on this chart, what's actually kind of surprising is that the top one is elephants.
Oh, they don't even have sharks on there.
No, they don't, unfortunately. So I don't know where sharks are on this chart. I don't know how many sharks have.
What's a massacue? What's a massacue?
Macaw.
This?
Oh.
Yeah, it's a macaque, and it's a type of monkey. Okay, so you were right that the humans are kind of in this range. And they're actually grouped together with all of these other monkeys, right? So we're actually not worse than a chimpanzee, so that's kind of encouraging. But we're definitely not as good as an elephant.
And then there's a huge gap between us and rabbits.
Yeah. So dogs are actually not that impressive in the number of genes they have, but they still are very good at smelling, right? Okay, any guesses why, any ideas of why maybe the elephant has lots of
Trunk
genes?
is so long.
Yeah? Yeah? Maybe because of its, well, I don't know if it smells in its trunk, but the other thing is that elephants are very social animals. So they care a lot about their herd members, and they also travel across very long distances, and they also communicate over long distances. So my guess would be that elephants need to be very good at smelling for social reasons. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to do kind of a little thought experiment. And what it involves is that scientists have identified lots of these genes for different types of smells, but how do they know what smell or what odorant a certain gene can detect? And one way to test that is to do an experiment in fruit flies, because fruit flies are very small and easy to work with, and you can very easily manipulate their genes. So you can very simply just get rid of a gene and then figure out what the gene was supposed to be doing in a normal fly. So on your handout, do they have the smell handouts already? Yeah. And it would be great if they also had pencils.
While you guys are doing that, I looked the answer for chart, and apparently the chart genome is not well sequenced, so we cannot tell you exactly how many receptor genes are in the chart genome.
All right, so in the context of fly experiments, if you were a scientist, how would you test whether a fly can smell something or not? And this picture is giving you a pretty big hint of how you might do it.
Oh, you're asking for an actual.
Yes, I'm just think about how would you do it. You have a fly, you want to know if it can smell a certain smell.
Put it in top of the smell and see if it flies over to it.
Yep, exactly. So that's what's in this picture. You have a plate, and on one side there's something that has this smell, and on the other side there's nothing. And then you put actually a bunch of flies, and the easiest is to use fly larvae because they just crawl around and they're not going to fly off in the middle of your experiment. You just put a bunch of fly larvae in the middle, and then you see if they go towards the smell or if they go away from the smell. And that if they can detect it, then either they will like it or they will not like it, right? So they will go towards it or away from it. What if they can't detect it? What would you expect to see?
Just them like wandering around.
Right. Then they would have no idea where they're going. They would just wander around, explore, look for food, and then it would be equal chance of ending up on either side, right? Okay. So now we found a gene that we think is responsible for a specific kind of smell, and now we want to figure out which smell it is. Okay? So how would we design this experiment? How would you start? What would you do with your first plate?
You place one type of food and the one that we believe cannot smell that type of food
Mm-hmm.
into the plate together and see where they go.
You want to put them in the plate together?
Yeah, with the food and the.
Oh, you want the food and the non-smelling.
Yeah.
Okay. So the types of flies where we got rid of a gene, we call them knockouts. Okay. Okay. So we take the knockout flies and we put them on a plate with food or the smell. We want it to be a very specific smell. So we're going to put a very specific smell. Oh, I don't know what else to.
You can just take a bolognese.
Okay. Can you see it over here?
Yeah.
Okay. So we take our knockout mutant flies. We're going to put them all in the middle, right? And then we have a smell on one side and nothing on the other side. And then what do you expect to happen?
What do you mean knockout?
Knockout means that we took a very specific gene and we got rid of it.
We hope that they would go towards.
Okay. So let's actually have two plates side by side because we want to compare the mutant flies to the normal ones, right? So and the normal ones we call wild type. So we're going to have just the same setup for the mutant ones, the knockouts, and the normal ones. That the normal ones definitely have this gene, right? And the knockouts do not have this gene. So if we have the smell that is detected by the gene that we think it is responsible for that, then what do we expect to happen in each of these plates? Arya.
For the knockout one, I guess isn't it equal chance that they would go anywhere because they don't have the genes, so they don't really know.
Right. We would expect them not to know where they're going because they can't smell the smell. So they would end up equally on either side. And you don't have to say again because you already told me that the wild types, let's say it's a really nice smell, and the wild types really like the smell, so they would all end up on this side. Right? Okay. What other kind of conditions do we need to test to make sure that this is correct? It's called a control.
Another type of food, or putting no food there?
Yeah, putting no food.
Sorry?
Putting no food.
Putting no food, exactly. So we have no food, and we would do it for both types of flies, right? And what do you expect to happen this time?
Go everywhere.
Both of them would go everywhere. Exactly. Why is it important to do these experiments? Like the results are really boring. Why do you care? Why do you want to do this control experiment?
So we know what their normal, like, what their normal activity looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure that this behavior is actually due to the smell. Like what if it ends up that you had placed your test plates, if you had put the plates in a certain orientation in your room and they just liked going to that side, not because of the smell, but because of some other reason, that would mess up your experiment, right? So you want to make sure that normally they would not care about where they are in the plate if there's no smell there. Great, good job, guys.
And we'll call it random distribution, right?
Yes. So if they go everywhere, it's random. Okay, very good. What's next? Okay. So I told you about what's happening inside the nose and about the sensory cells that detect smell. The next thing that happens is that this information gets sent to the brain, right? And actually the very first place that it goes is a place called the olfactory bulb. And it actually lies right on top of that epithelium where the cells are located. And the size of your olfactory bulb can also tell us something about how good you are at smelling. So we're going to compare some different brains and think about how good they are at smelling and what kind of animal they might be from. So what do you think this first brain is? I'll give you a hint. It's looking at it from the bottom. So this might not be a view that you've seen very often. Human, yes. Human brain, and the olfactory bulbs are already highlighted for you. They're kind of colored in yellow. So they're really small right here. Let's look at the next one. Where do you think the olfactory bulbs are on this brain? Any guesses? I'll give you a hint. They're much bigger. Yeah, they're actually this entire thing at the front. In the human, they were just these tiny little things that stick out, but in this brain, they're really big. So what do you think? Would this animal be good at smelling or bad at smelling? Probably better than a human, right? What animal could this be?
Mouse.
Could be a mouse. A what?
Horse.
Horse? That's an interesting guess. It's a dog. So you guessed earlier that dogs are very good at smelling, and they didn't have a very impressive number of receptor genes for smell, but they do have very impressive olfactory bulbs. Okay, next one. Do you see the olfactory bulbs on this one? They're not as obvious, but they are right here, these ones. Any guesses about the type of animal? Is it as good at smelling as the dog is?
No, but
Oh. Yeah, not as good as a dog, but probably better than a human. This one happens to be a sheep. You might have done a sheep brain dissection before in a class. Okay, last one. This one is now not from the bottom, but from the top.
That's a rat brain.
That's a rat brain. And these are the olfactory bulbs. And it's a mouse, but mouse and rat brains are very similar. So that was a very good guess. And if you look at proportionally how big these bulbs are compared to the whole brain, it's really impressive when you compare it to the human, where the bulbs are kind of really tiny. Okay. The last thing I want to tell you about is another way in which taste and smell are connected. And Adara already really gave it all away by saying flavor 100 times at the beginning of the class. And she was exactly right. So when Vanessa was giving her lecture, you might have been surprised to learn that you can only taste 5 different things. Or maybe you knew this already. But when you're eating food, for example, I'm sure you have more experiences while you're eating the food than just whether it's salty or sweet or bitter or sour. You're detecting lots of different things, right? So if you're eating a piece of meat, you have lots more experiences. Like you can detect different types of meat, for example, how they taste, or you could eat different types of vegetables and detect how they taste differently. And some foods you like a lot, and some foods you don't like a lot. And a lot of what you are actually experiencing while eating food is not just taste, but the combination of taste and smell. And we call the combination flavor. And the way that this works is, as Dara already said, your taste system and your smell system are connected by the same airway. So in the back of your throat, there's actually a channel where whatever air is in your mouth also goes into your nose. And there's something called retronasal olfaction. So normal olfaction, or what we call orthonasal olfaction, is air coming in through your nostrils into this cavity. But another way that you can smell things is for the air to come through your mouth and the back of your throat into this olfactory cavity. And then that way you're actually smelling a lot of the food while you're eating it. So keep that in mind for our very last activity. But now we're going to, again, split into 2 groups and do an experiment about your olfactory acuity. So you will get to see who is very good at detecting and identifying different types of smells. And then at the very end, we will do a flavor experiment. Adara, you have a question?
Do you think that humans will like evolve with lower taste and smell because we're not like in the wild smelling different things?
Yeah, maybe. So all the things that we said, the 4 things that we said at the beginning that animals need smell for, some of them humans don't seem to need as much. Like we don't need to avoid predators by smell, for example. We don't need to hunt by smell. Smell is very useful when you're eating food, but we don't need to hunt by smell. So yeah, maybe we have evolved, at least not to pay attention to our sense of smell because we don't need it as much. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.